Good evening. I'd like to call to order the June 21st meeting of the Board of Education. Before we begin our meeting this evening, I would like to announce with a heavy heart the passing of our friend Hazel Hobbs. Hazel was a dedicated, loyal, and longtime volunteer of the New Canaan Public Schools and a cherished member of this board. She served on this Board of Education for multiple terms, including 3 years as its chair. When she retired only a few years ago, we joined together to honor her for her exceptional contributions to our schools and our community over the years. Hazel was devoted and passionate member of our community and a leader in education, serving both our community and many others around us. Her many years of service to education and our schools will continue to influence and inspire our work for years to come. She will be missed greatly, but I am certain her legacy will continue to inspire future teachers, volunteers, and community leaders. At this time, I would ask that we take a moment of silence to honor and remember Hazel. Thank you. Next, Dr. Alessia will call for nominations for a Board of Education Secretary to serve the unexpired term of Julie Reeves, who resigned last week due to an out-of-state move later this summer. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge and thank Julie for her contributions and efforts while serving on our board. Julie was a valued and spirited member of this board, and we are very grateful to her for her work and support of our schools and our community. Julie, her husband Michael, and her kids Spencer, Kate, and Vivi were all wonderful members of our community as well, and they will be missed very much, and we wish them all the best in their move south. So, Dr. Alessia, will you please go ahead?
Sure. So I'd like to ask the board if there are any nominations for the position of secretary to serve out the unexpired duration of Julie's term.
I would like to nominate Jennifer Richardson. Jennifer was a longtime secretary of our board for 3 years prior to Julie serving, and she did it with enthusiasm and very great work. So we appreciate her time, and I think given the short duration of this term, hopefully she'd be willing to come back and finish out her work as secretary.
Is there a second? Penny?
I'd like to second it. Jen was a great secretary, and I'm thrilled that you'd consider doing it again.
Any further nominations? All in favor? Congratulations, Jen.
Thank you.
And thank you.
You're on. You're on duty immediately.
Do you need a pen? All right.
All right, so next up is to approve minutes for 3 meetings. First up is May 25th. We have a motion. Jen, second. Sherry, all in favor? May 26th minutes, that was the workshop. I have a motion. Bob, second. Penny, all in favor? Okay. And meeting minutes from June 7th. Do I have a motion? Penny, second. Sherry, all in favor? Okay. Next up is comments from the public. To ensure the public, oh wait, sorry, missed the agenda. Getting ahead of myself. Next is to review and approve this evening's agenda. Is there a motion? Deanna, second?
No, I actually wanted to make a motion to amend tonight's agenda to remove the action item about the electronic meeting policy until it's had a chance to go through the Policy and Governance Committee.
Okay, do you want to get a first and second
Yeah.
on the agenda and then make a motion to amend the agenda?
Okay. So the motion was made by Penny. Is there a second on the agenda? Sherry?
Okay, so now it's a
Discussion.
motion to
Discussion,
amend the
yeah.
agenda.
Okay. Is there discussion on,
Well, you need a second for the motion to
oh,
amend.
sorry, second for Deanna's. Bob, thank you. Discussion.
I can briefly share. I mean, that,
Yeah, I think there's enough edits after I read the policy, and, I know we are sort of in a COVID environment and we're doing things a little bit differently, but there's enough edits that I think are necessary, that it would be important to have a committee review first and then bring it before the board, so we're not spending a significant amount of time reviewing a lot of edits that I think may be necessary for this policy.
Okay. And it's at the will of the board for sure. Just to understand, my thinking was coming in that it's a first and a second read. And traditionally, we have, as you know, over the last few years, it did pause with COVID. We had been sort of reviewing and approving policies wholesale by series. And we'd gotten into a process of having a governance meeting in between the first and second reading, where we'd bring forward the first reading and then collect feedback from the board, have a meeting with the governance committee prior to the second reading, and that vote. But if you would rather, that's fine either way. It just, that's what we were doing when we were doing the whole series. But if people are more comfortable doing the governance meeting first and then bring it before the board, then we'd have to just make a decision whether or not to have another governance meeting in between the first or second reading, which again is fine either way. Whatever, at the will of the board, it's fine. On our end, it's perfectly
Yeah,
fine.
I just think it would be helpful to have sort of the board input on this going in. I don't know that it would be necessary after the first read to have a second governance meeting. We can decide after the first read, but, it just depends. But I just reading through the policy, I think there's some edits that need to be made.
I guess my comment would be, given our timing, I think it would be helpful to have this policy in place for fall, as we enter fall and people are going back to work, and we may have board members who are traveling more often. So it gives us, if we want to provide a first round of comments and perhaps the governance committee could convene and thinking about it, maybe that gives us a little more time to make the changes, and I don't, meet again this summer, because we'll have to have a quorum in place this summer to be able to even gather again. We'll need to check everybody's schedules, given, I think people are traveling more often this summer than perhaps in the past.
I appreciate that. I just think we have a policy for meetings, and so that would just be in place. So I don't think there's any urgency. We have a meeting policy, and, and then, this would just be an amendment to that meeting policy. So I don't see the urgency, I guess.
Okay. Other comments?
Yeah, and the other thing, it should have went through before it came for the first read, in my opinion, through the governance committee. It would probably, we would have cleared up some of these things, the questions we already had, so we would, we wouldn't be doing this, so. And then the last policy change we made didn't go through the governance committee at all, so it's not really, we're not following that policy. We didn't do that the last time. We had to vote on the policy change. It didn't go through governance. That should have went through governance as well.
Which policy are you referring to?
The curriculum committee one?
That wasn't a policy change. That was
All right. What was it?
Codification.
Okay, whatever it is, it didn't go through governance either, so.
Okay, Jen?
Can I just ask, so if we do delay this tonight and it goes to the policy, the governance committee, so so we do have like 3 meetings right now on the docket, so if they can meet prior to our next meeting, which is like July, 12th-ish, then at least then we would have 2 meetings, right?
Oh, yeah, that's, again, I think that if that's what the board is most comfortable with, it doesn't pose a problem, certainly, for us to do it.
If the policy committee feels strongly about it. then
Yeah, I just
if we have
wanted,
the
yeah,
time.
definitely.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be clear that, it wasn't an attempt to do anything that we hadn't done in the
Right.
past. It was simply to, bring it forward and then have the meeting after we collect the feedback from the
Right.
full board, which
Right.
is how we were doing the policies before. So,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Okay. So we'll take a vote on the amendment that Deanna proposed. All in favor? Okay, opposed?
Only because I can't be here at the next meeting, but I'm fine with it.
Okay.
So I wanted
Sure.
to participate electronically.
Sure, so. So what I would just encourage for the board, if you take a look, if you do have those revisions or changes in mind, and you're unable to attend the governance policy, please send them on to me, and we'll be sure to share them with the committee.
And I just as a point of, our chair of the governance committee has now resigned, so we need to, whoever wants to call the meeting, we need someone to call the meeting. So-
We're due for a meeting, so we'll make, it'll happen.
Okay.
Glad
Okay.
to do that.
So
Okay.
I'm going to be here through the Friday before our board meeting, so if I can come to that governance meeting, I would love to be a part of it.
Excellent.
Don't think I'm officially on the committee, but I would love to
Okay.
participate in that.
All right, so we'll strike this from tonight's agenda, and then we need to vote on the amended agenda. Is there a motion? Deanna, second. Sherry, all in favor? Okay, thank you all. All right. Now we will move to comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. And I have to say, it's really wonderful to see members of the public in our meeting. So thank you all for coming. Is there anyone wishing to address the board? If so, please come forward and just ask that you state your name. At the podium is great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alessia Moroz. I recently moved to New Canaan with my husband and 2 children. I have a PhD in math and was formerly an assistant professor at Caltech. I'm here to discuss the data for making masks optional in schools. New Canaan schools open full-time in person for most students. I know most of us will agree that that was absolutely the right decision. Students need in-person learning, and you recognize that. That was a great step forward, and given everything we have learned since then, we need to keep moving forward. Case rates are no longer high, and the number of hospitalized COVID patients in Connecticut is down to 33 and decreasing as we speak. 71% of all residents in Fairfield County over 18 are now fully vaccinated. Numerous other states with far lower vaccination rates than Connecticut have ended, and some have even banned, mask mandates in public schools if their cases continue to go down. We have gotten COVID under control and protected our most vulnerable population. Now is the time to let each family make its own decision on masks. After 15 months of collecting data on children and COVID, we have the statistics. The survival rate of COVID is 99.99% among children. Getting hospitalized or even contracting COVID or transmitting it is far more rare than among adults. There have only been 4 COVID deaths among children in the state of Connecticut. I know these numbers are not zero, and that means that for some people, they are not good enough. But 0 never was and never will be a reasonable expectation. Children are several times more likely to die from drowning or motor vehicle accidents than from COVID, and yet we allow the option of cars on the road or using town pools. We need to do the same with masks. Covering faces and restricting natural social interaction has negative impacts on children, socially, physically, and psychologically. A recent lab analysis found that masks worn for hours in schools accumulate pathogenic bacteria and parasites, including those associated with causing pneumonia, tuberculosis, and meningitis, among others. My daughter, whose first language is not English, is behind her peers in English language development and has trouble being understood with a mask on. These policies...
Excuse me, that's 2 minutes. There's 2 minutes to speak.
I just
Sorry.
have one sentence. I didn't get a
Yeah,
word.
yeah, sure.
These policies disproportionately affect the underserved Hispanic and Asian communities across the state, and for such families where the negatives of masks are high, they should have the choice not to use them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, board members and the community, for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Shannon Rowe. We moved here 6 years ago with the understanding that this town and education system was not only one of the best in the state, but the entire country. This past year showed just that. We were one of the only school districts that were open in person, face-to-face, for almost the entire school year. Our district was in the forefront of the state with the planning and execution of our COVID response, and I will be forever grateful along with the community. The reason I'm here tonight was for the mask issue, but as I see this sheet, I'm actually not here for that anymore. I'm here for the COVID vaccine issue. As I read this, it's actually really disturbing to see that I, or someone that's not vaccinated, who's already had COVID, recovered from it, can't volunteer at my child's school. Don't you think that's segregation? What do you think is going to happen to our children when the COVID vaccine rolls out this September? My kid's not a test subject. I don't have any future data for what it can do to them. You're going to pressure me into giving a COVID vaccine to my child for a 99.9% survival rate, that just seems unfair. You're going to segregate them in the school, put them at separate tables. Do you think that that's fair for our children? It's horrific. It's repeating the past. And I will never allow that to happen. This needs to be thought out. We don't separate kids for the flu shot. Why don't we put a polio table out, an MMR table out? We can just separate them all. This is not okay. And you need to rethink this. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Alessia Miller, and I'm a parent of a 5, 4, and 2-year-old. I speak before you today to implore you to consider the ramifications of requiring young children to wear masks all day while at school. Simply put, mask requirements amount to government overreach. No federal requirements on masks exist, as public health regulations are determined on a state-by-state basis. According to the Connecticut rules set to go into effect after the executive order expires, if students who decline to wear masks, they will not be allowed into school and must attend classes virtually, an arrangement that is discriminatory and in effect subjects these children to a separate and unequal education. In effect, schools are discriminating against children because they are being physically removed from the schools. The doors of the schools are locked to them if non-compliant. As you know, masks are ineffective, children are unlikely to spread the virus, and students are being denied access to a free public education required by the Constitution. These rules are being put into place without adequate public input, interfere with parents' rights to determine medical decisions for their children. State officials impose the requirement with no scientific or legislative foundation. Even during a public health emergency, you still have to notify the legislator and go through a regulatory process. Instead, parents are being told you're going to do this whether you like it or not, and if you don't like it, your kids are going to be shut out of school. The Connecticut Freedom Alliance has previously fought Connecticut lawmakers' efforts to eliminate a religious exemption to mandated vaccines. This is no different. Forcing a parent to inject their child with a vaccine that was swiftly made and rushed to public use is beyond the bounds of both the state and federal constitution. It is critical for young children who are still learning phonemes to see how words and sounds are formed. Masks prohibit them from seeing mouths move and seeing how sounds are made. Think about the long-term impact for these children who will most likely develop speech later as a result of these mask mandates. We choose you to make difficult decisions for our children. We chose you to make difficult decisions that would be in our children's best interests. Enforcing 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9-year-old little children to cover their noses and their mouths where they breathe for 7 hours a day, every day, for a virus that is no greater impact to children than the seasonal flu is simply not in their best interest.
That's 2
Again, I
minutes.
implore you to consider your decision regarding the Canaan mask policy.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you. My name is Joe Miller, Elsie's husband. I wanted to cite some information from an article. I'm sure I'm going to run out of time fairly quickly. That was done, linked to the NIH website that is peer-reviewed. The aim was to find, test, evaluate, and compile scientifically proven related side effects of wearing masks. The literature revealed relevant adverse effects of masks in numerous disciplines. This paper refers to psychological and physical deterioration, as well as multiple symptoms described because of their consistent, recurrent, and uniform presentation from different disciplines as mask-induced exhaustion syndrome, MIES. Objectified evidence changes in respiratory physiology of mask wearers with significant correlation of oxygen depletion and fatigue. Extended mask wearing by the general population could lead to relevant effects and consequences in many medical fields. In April 2020, the WHO recommended the use of masks only for symptomatic ill individuals and healthcare workers, not widespread use. June 2020 changed the general use of masks. However, analysis study commissioned by the WHO, evidence level 1A, the highest level, shows no clear scientifically graspable benefit of moderate or strong evidence was derived from wearing masks. Only weak evidence at best justified everyday use. April 2020 highlighted danger of self-contamination, possible breathing difficulties, and false sense of security. June 2020 found additional potential adverse effects. Of the mathematically evaluable 44 papers, they were able to determine and demonstrate a statistically significant correlation in the analysis between the negative side effects of blood oxygen depletion and fatigue in mask wearers. Literature review confirms relevant undesired medical, organ, and organ system-related phenomena occurred by wearing masks. Neurology, psychology, psychiatry, dermatology, ENT medicine, pediatrics, to name a few. As early as 2005, demonstrated that wearing surgical masks in healthy medical personnel leads to measurable physical effects. The role of dead space volume, which occurs when not all of the air in each breath is available for the exchange of oxygen and CO2. And CO2
That's 2 minutes. Sorry.
Okay, as a result of the significant change. I guess, in short, if I could just wrap up quickly, I think that a lot of information that is less scientifically reviewed has been perpetuated nonstop, and there are articles such as this that demonstrate concrete, high-level confidence that mask wearing could actually be significantly more detrimental in the long term than the possibility provided by other data, statistically showing the low likelihood of student-to-student transmissibility in primary elementary school children. So thank you very much for your time, and I can send you the document if you'd like.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Before I start, looking around the room, I want you guys to just think like I'm just making assumptions based on the ages of children of us versus you. If your kids were our kids' age, my daughter's 3, and that's who I'm going to talk about, what position you would be standing in right now. Because it might look a little different from the ages that your kids are now versus what our kids are. So,
Okay. Could you state your name, please?
sorry. My name is Amanda Morgan, and I am a mother of 2 preschool-aged children in town. I'm not going to reiterate what others have said regarding the data, research, and numbers. I believe everyone in this room is smart and capable enough to understand that masks for young children are not necessary and pose more risks for their social development and mental well-being than they provide safety from COVID-19. What I am going to do is talk about my daughter, Lacey, who's 3. She, along with many other children, had to learn to socialize and show emotions with a mask on this year. I told myself, it's just 1 year, maybe it will end early, and it didn't. The head of our preschool said to me once I expressed my concerns, "Oh, children are so resilient." I'll circle back to this comment once my story is complete. A few months into the mask wearing, Lacey started giving us a hard time going to school. Things would get so bad that she would be kicking and screaming when I would get her out of the car. It was heart-wrenching. At this age, it's difficult to discern whether this could be the result of a tantrum or otherwise age-appropriate behavior versus when something could be truly wrong. If this happened once or twice, I would chalk it up to tantrums, but this happened most days per week for months on end. I'm sorry. In January, my family and I fled to Texas for 6 weeks, and my daughter was able to attend school while we were there. Before she went to the school, I said to my husband, it would be interesting to see how she reacts to this school given what's been going on at home. In Texas, snacks were allowed, there was no spacing among students, and no masks. After our time there, not once did my daughter say she didn't want to go to school. Not once did she give us a hard time at drop-off or pickup. And not once did I have to receive a phone call from the school letting me know that my daughter was okay after the concerning behavior that occurred when I left that morning. As she got older and the months went on back home, my husband and I had many conversations with her about why she didn't like school. She finally said to us, "Well, Mommy, there's a few teachers who make me wear a mask when I'm uncomfortable. Our children are smarter than we give them credit for. They're also suffering more than we believed throughout this pandemic. Remember how the head of our school once said to me, children are so resilient. Well, when she asked me why we wouldn't be returning to school this coming year, I said to her, that comment about kids being so resilient was a bunch of BS, and it's something everyone told themselves to make them feel better about what we're subjecting our children to."
It's 2 minutes.
Can I just finish? What she said to me next, while incredibly sad, made me feel vindicated in knowing my original thoughts on this were correct. She said to me, "You know what, Amanda, you're right. I just got off the phone with a local psychologist, and they don't have the capacity to see all of the kids that need to go in right now. So you tell me this, is protecting our children from a virus that most likely will not affect them worth the trauma it is causing them socially and mentally. I hope you will all use the power you currently have to do what's in the best interest of our children. We in New Canaan could begin a trend in the right direction and have our school peers look up to us. We are all entrusting you to help us make this a reality. Thank you so much."
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? We'll move on. All right, next up is reports and recognition, and tonight, first on the agenda is a year-end report on COVID-19 with Dr. Lutzy. Oh, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
I wasn't really prepared for this. I didn't even know you were having a meeting until my friend told me just a few hours ago, so I'm totally sorry.
That's okay.
I'm Phyllis Alfieri, and my daughter is in the 7th grade. And I, as a parent, just would like it to be where we'd have the option of the mask. I mean, if we chose to wear one, if she felt comfortable, because even now, in certain circumstances, I still have mine. We weren't vaccinated, and that's our choosing, and we shouldn't be forced to be vaccinated. And I see in here, at some point, it's going to be required. And that shouldn't be required either, because it's still being examined by, it's only for emergency services that people are really getting the vaccination. And a lot of people aren't aware of that. And unless you're listening to the news 24/7, which I try to do, and are up on the current information, there's a lot of misinformation. So I just wish and hope that it would be a choice that we could have and not a forceful thing. And that's with the mask and the vaccination, because it'll really push people different directions, if not.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Oh, one more. Is this the last? Yeah, so this will be the, go ahead, last speaker, because we have a 15-minute limit. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Laura Kelly. I have a rising 7th grader, a rising 2nd grader, and a rising kindergartner, as well as an 18-month at home. I just want to add my voice that I think the mask should be voluntary, not mandatory, as well as the vaccines. I think my entire family had COVID. My husband was hospitalized. He's still on oxygen for it and dealing with effects. All 4 of my children had it. They're fine. They were fine during it. I was sick during it, but I'm fine after. To say that my children have had COVID and then have to be vaccinated when my doctors tell me that they don't have to be, I think is egregious. I also think it's egregious to say I can't go and volunteer and be part of my child's school. We moved here 5 weeks before the pandemic, and I've never been in their schools. And I would like to be an involved parent in this community, an involved parent in my children's lives, and I think that we can make it safe and voluntary and figure out a way to make everyone in the community welcomed and not separate our children and turn them into political targets based on their medical personal history. And that's just my statement.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Go on ahead, thank you.
All right, well, thank you. So our first report and recognition is the COVID-19 year-end report, which is currently in draft form, and we do anticipate finalizing the draft and being able to disseminate this to the public this week. We worked to capture some of the data points throughout the course of the year, and feel like it's very important to kind of memorialize the success that we had throughout this year, because as several folks shared with us just tonight, I do think that our success far outpaced most, and we want to continue to learn from that and be able to help others learn from that, and to make sure that whatever we do going forward as we go into next year and beyond, we continue moving forward. And that's sort of a theme of our review here and what we have in the report. Again, it's not publicly available yet, but it will be soon, so I just thought I'd show a couple of the highlights on the screen. Glad to take any questions, and we'll just move from there. Okay? So the report itself is quite extensive at about 50 pages. That is in part because we try to tell our story in here, and so we have a letter from me, from Vivian Birdsall, the president of the New Canaan Educators Association. We have accounts from each of our building principals. We have Some accounts from students, high school students, about their experience, seniors who graduated this year, who, as we know, we're right in the throe of this, right in the midst of it for the last year and a half, and sort of what the experience was like for them. We wanted to really try to make sure that all of the folks, the stakeholders, had a voice in putting the report together. And again, afterwards, if you think about it later on and you have some other suggestions, certainly feel free to pass them along. Again, our target is to try to disseminate this by the end of the week. And we'll do that, okay? So, as I mentioned, letter from me, a letter from Vivian, who is a very, an incredible partner through all of this. And just as I get into it, I again there's so many people to thank, but want to really say thank you to our cabinet, to our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Parenti, to Bill Tesber, our Assistant Superintendent, to Dr. Keating, our Director of Business Finance, to Darlene Pianco, who couldn't be with us tonight. But really, that team, the 4 plus me, the 5 of us, really steered the ship throughout the course of the year. And I think that, I know I couldn't have done it without them on a daily basis, sometimes a minute-by-minute basis. And I just couldn't be more grateful. We always say that it takes all of us. And that's why we really wanted to start with this quote about how much we can do when we all are together. And we're just so fortunate to have them. So some data points that I think worth sharing. Throughout the course of the year, we experienced 371 positive cases among students and staff across, district-wide. Those are confirmed positives. As you know, it started right in September. We put up our dashboard when it was all zeros. We kept that updated every single day throughout the course of the year. And as you know, about 4 weeks ago now, we got to a place where for the first time since September, we had 0 cases and 0 quarantines district-wide. And our progress has continued since then. It's really been a great story. And I'll show you that on a graph in a little bit. The number of quarantines as a result of those positive cases, you can see, is pretty extraordinary. It's more than half of our student body when we talk about 4,200 kids. There were some that were quarantined multiple times. The work that we did here was guided by the State Department of Ed, the Department of Public Health, and just again to thank everybody for their understanding as we were figuring this out. We know so much more today than we knew 12 months ago as we were putting plans together and putting things together. We're fortunate, and I'm glad to report we had very low community spread in our schools. We had 1 or 2 sort of super spreader events that did happen. In both cases, it was a teacher who was the first positive who then spread it in the class. And research shows that that's what happens more often than not, that it's the adult in the room because they're the ones doing the majority of talking. They use a louder voice. It's generally not kid to kid. We did see some student-to-student transmission in some sports teams. And again, we're just not sure, was that on the ice or on the field, or was it in the locker room, or was it at a pasta party? There's different ways to try to understand that. But we worked very hard to unpack that throughout. And Janet Reed, as our district nursing supervisor, and her staff really shouldered the brunt of the work around contact tracing and communication there. And again, it was a team effort from start to finish. We did something that no other school district was doing in the state right from the beginning that I think was really a cornerstone or a hallmark of our efforts here. We ran those testing events, and we did those mass testing events for students and staff across the district and students in grades 7th grade and up. The testing helped us to really understand what was going on. Because, in an absence of data, it's easy to go to a worst case scenario and try to plan from that. We wanted to have the data and be able to make informed decisions. So all the way as early as August we began, and even July in the community we began doing the testing. We were doing it monthly for folks. And you may recall back in, I think it was probably October, my email after our first mass testing event, where some people thought we were doing it to try to close, but we were really doing it to stay open. And my email went out that said, great news, we tested over 530 people and we had 0 positives. And then a few hours later, I had to send another email out that said we had some positives, we had to quarantine some people. But that was the nature of the roller coaster we were on. But the testing worked to rip off the blindfold and know what we were dealing with and make informed decisions. We also ran vaccination clinics for our staff the minute that the vaccines were available. They were in short supply, as you'll recall, back in the winter. We were able to get our clinics together, and we had the vast majority of folks come through. And we took an approach where we wanted to be sure that no one had an advantage over somebody else to getting the vaccines because they were in limited supply. So we actually went ahead and scheduled everybody and then allowed them to withdraw if they didn't want to be vaccinated, instead of sending out like a sign-up genius and asking them to sign up. Because we knew doing a sign-up genius would advantage people who sat in front of the computer all day and disadvantage other folks like our bus drivers, our custodians, and others that aren't in front of the computer. So we did it by age. We started at the oldest and worked our way down and made sure that everybody who wanted a vaccine was able to get one. We resultingly have a high vaccination rate. And our communication throughout the course of the year, we sent out over 50 district-wide COVID-19 updates and communications with the community. And that website that we created through the microsite, the Charting Our Course microsite, had over 150,000 hits throughout the course of the year. And I was only about 149,000 of them. So as you know, the way the mitigation strategies worked throughout the year and the way they're designed, they're sort of like layers of Swiss cheese, right? You sort of one by itself is not all that effective, but when you stack these things up one after the other, they get more and more effective and they work. So we worked over the summer to put together our cohorts, the class groupings that we had at different ages, the social distancing or physical distancing. We maximized the distance available in all of our classrooms. We did mandate face coverings throughout the course of the year. And that was based on the Adapt, Advance, Achieve document from Governor Lamont, which did mandate that in school building. The frequent hand washing was built into our schedule, the daily monitoring, and we really stressed for students and staff, if you don't feel well, don't come to school. So as a result of those mitigation strategies, we've gone through over 2,000 units of sanitizer, over 4,700 face shields, over 30,000 masks, 4,500 feet of custom partitions. As you'll recall, we didn't hire a company to come in and do that for us. We just bought the sheets of plexiglass and used the shop downstairs, and our custodians and maintenance workers built all of the partitions around, so it probably saved us 50% or more on that overall cost. Same with the tabletop desk shields, 5,100 tubs of wipes, 186,600 boxes of gloves. I mean, it was a far-reaching, I think, well-designed and well-thought-out strategy to make all of this work, and it did. So the results, shoot over to page 18. Again, if we look at our dashboard, we had 305 positive students throughout the course of the year, and a little over 2,000 quarantined students, 65 positive cases in staff, and 158 quarantined staff members. Throughout the course of the years, unique, this is again draft, it should say temporary distance learners, 660. That may be a student who is quarantined different times or whatever else, so 660 students uniquely. And then our vaccination rates. You see the graph on the bottom left, and it's larger in this other document that we'll go through about 21, 22. But it really, again, shows the roller coaster that we were on. And you can sort of follow that to go to right in October, November. The rates were climbing. We didn't know where the ceiling would be. As a matter of fact, the first guidance had 9 cases per 100,000 and below was considered low community spread. It was, I believe, 24 down to 10 was moderate, and 25 plus was considered high. And the very first guidance from the DPH was close your schools if you're over 25 cases per 100,000 students. Well, if you take a look at this, you can see that had we followed that guidance, we would have been closed from October 29th right through February entirely, all distance learning. Of course, DPH continued to update their guidance as well, and we sort of charted our own course as we felt was appropriate, knowing what we knew and as we continued to learn. So as a result of all of that, our elementary schools were fully in session 87% of the year. They had a hybrid at 11%. Remember, we did that in the beginning. We just averaged the grades because we phased in by grade, and we didn't want to overwhelm. We get a little more specific school by school in the next couple of pages. But we were only fully closed this school year 3% of the time. And I'm very proud of that, as you know. And that 3%, that really was the week after the holidays that we announced to folks we're going to be closed that week, let people test if they've been traveling and feel safe about a return. And if you look at the rates, again, on that grid, that's really right where we were at the very peak, right? So I do believe it was the right decision at the time for that 1 week to just give a little time for people to test and to be home. And then we're able to bring folks back in. And as the rates are going down, throughout the winter into the spring, we were adjusting our quarantine guidelines as well. You know, we're moving from 14-day flat to 10-day and with a test, and then we even moved to 7 days with a test after 5. So we're sort of moving along with the CDC's guidelines. They recommended 14 days and had given those other options, and we kind of phased those in, constantly monitoring this number of cases per 100,000 people, because again, the number of cases per 100,000 is a leading indicator, that pointing the direction of where you're going. Others, hospitalizations and deaths, are lagging indicators, right? So this is one of our keys. So anyway, district-wide, we were only closed 3% of the time throughout the entire course of the year, which I'm, again, immensely proud of. At the middle school, across the 4 grades there, we were fully in person 83% of the time. We phased them in the fall after we phased in our elementary. And then our high school, as you recall, we brought them in the fall and then had to return to hybrid because the case numbers were starting to go up and we needed more space. And we had to make sure things were safe first of all. But then as we went through the holidays and came back in, we really saw that the 50-50 hybrid was taking its toll. You know, as we heard tonight, this has been very, very tough on kids, and we figured we've got to find a better way to do this. So we invented the 75% hybrid and brought kids back in for a couple of weeks at 75% instead of 50%, and so that they got to see all of their classmates over the course of an 8-day cycle. And that helped us, and I think it helped the kids quite a bit. So fully remote 3%, the hybrid plus 16%, hybrid 37%, and fully in-person 45% of the time for our high school, which, again, I'm incredibly proud of. And it's only due to the collaborative and combined work of everybody. So the next couple of pages, you'll go into each of the elementary schools, and you'll see commonality across the board. When we brought one grade level in one school, we brought them in at all schools. And you know, our folks were working incredibly hard to make it all work. Each principal has a letter to talk a little bit about the year and a reflection that you know, certainly I encourage you to take a look at. And a special thanks from each of the groups. So we have East, and then we go into South, and then we go into West. Breaking down the middle school a little bit, you know, the cohorts are really by team when we get in the middle school. So we looked at 5th grade as a 2-person cohorts. We get in the 6th, 7th, and 8th, and we look at the teams as the cohorts. And we worked very, very hard to create schedules where the cohorts were not mixing. And so like what we're looking at doing next year is allowing them to mix, but instead of all 4 teams on a grade level, can we do it with 2 teams? And I don't want to get ahead of myself, so we'll talk about that when we talk about next year's planning. But again, we phase them in here with our youngest kids first, because we wanted to prioritize, and that's really why we started with our 1st graders, right? We brought in our youngest kids first, you know, as we did this. We did the opposite at the high school, and we started with our 12th graders and brought them in first, and then worked down 12, 11, 10, 9. For the same reason, we felt that the 12th graders were the ones who needed to be in person. We knew they were going to be going out on internship in at the end of the year, so we wanted to bring them in fully in, let them be together, and you know, some really powerful days having those kids together in the school, really for the first time since March of 2020, when that occurred this year. So some very powerful and meaningful experiences there. Our student reflections, again, 3 seniors, shared with us, you know, the challenges for as students. In the beginning, in March of 2020, nobody knew we'd be closed for the entire year and be on remote learning that whole year. The first plan was 2 weeks. And so even Laura in her reflection talks about thinking, gosh, that's 2 weeks I get to hang out with my friends. And then it turned into more and turned into more. And so, you know, it was challenging for kids. And as you know, my daughter graduated from high school this year as well. So I saw it all firsthand. And certainly that helped me to remain focused on what mattered most. But all of it is possible thanks to you, to our Board of Education, to the new Canaan Health Department, to the cooperation with our PTCs across the district, our PFA at the high school, I mean, the work that they did, the contributions that they made. You know, we asked our teachers and our faculty and staff across the board to do something that not only had they never done before, but that nobody was doing, which was to come to school every day and teach kids face-to-face, 5 days a week. even those schools that opened around when we did, they were taking a day for remote instruction, right? There were 4 days in person and 1 at home. We got in, I think, we got in first. We proved that it could be done safely and could be done well, and helped others to follow, because sticking with the nautical theme, right? Rising tide lifts all boats. We were doing our part to move things along. None of it would have been possible without the people on the list here, especially our Director of Health, Jen Eilson. Her contribution was amazing. Almost every weekend, almost every day, she was getting texts from me and back and forth, and even every weekend, Saturdays and Sundays, for contact tracing, for problem solving and figuring things out, and it was so important. And again, Janet and the nurses were key to all of it. So I look forward to putting this out in the public, but wanted to give you a brief overview, and again, we'll be going through and cleaning up a little bit. It's a draft right now, but welcome your feedback, and thank you and congratulations.
Congratulations to you and to the cabinet and to everyone really in the whole school system. It's been a remarkable year. Any comments, questions? Sherry?
So I just want to say that I think this type of evidence-based reflection is very powerful, and I think we've been talking as we go about the different successes that we've had through navigating the pandemic. But I think it's important to encapsulate it here as you've done. I think also the thanks are really important, because you've mentioned several times it really took a team effort, and the truly unique partnership that you have with the teachers and the teachers union that made this all possible. I think it's so important to acknowledge that. But I just want to say, like, there's obviously the data is here that really shows the success that we were not in person for 3%. This is the quantitative data, but the qualitative data is out there as well. I mean, I've got, friends and family literally across the nation, and, Michigan, Florida, California, and none of them had even a near quality experience that we had in person this year. I had a nephew who was a senior, and 80% of the school year was remote. My oldest son is at Duke University, and he had a full year of remote classes. So I do think it's important both quantitatively and qualitatively that we look back and also pull from the lessons learned going forward, because I think there is a lot. I mean, I think we all now are wise enough to know that this could happen again, or a variation of this could happen again. And so I think, institutionalizing this knowledge like you've done is really, job well done. So.
Thank you, Sherry. Yep, thank you. And I would just, my one comment, I mean, it's been a remarkable year, and we have so many thanks to give to so many people. But I guess looking back at where we've been and where we are, I think the amount of change that took place this year, we could have never made this much change happen if we tried. And so I think now we have to reflect and look at, the silver linings and the possibilities that exist before us now with all of this change, to reflect and think about the innovation and the possibility that lies before us as a school district, as a school system, and you as leaders. So I think that the possibilities are exciting, and that's what I look forward to hearing more about as we move through this, and hearing the feedback, that feedback from the teachers and the staff on what worked really well and what do we want to keep and hold on to and improve upon. So thank you, and onward. All right. So Darlene is not here. Are you doing the enrollment?
Dr. Krenti is.
Oh, thank you, Jill. All right, Dr. Krenti.
I will be filling everyone in on enrollment. Just to kind of backtrack a little bit, in May, we ask all families to complete data verification. We've had about 94% of our families complete the data verification. The data verification not only allows families to update their demographics, but it also gives them an opportunity to let us know whether they're going to be withdrawing their children. So that's really important to us as we begin to track our enrollment moving into the next school year. So things are really balancing off at each of the grade levels. Probably the grade level that we continue to watch most closely is kindergarten. So if we backtrack to April 29th, at that time we only had 238 kindergartners registered. And then in May we had 245, and now we're at 254. So we're close to our projected numbers of 262. And certainly as you look across at each of the buildings, we're watching certainly south and east very closely. This is a time where we do have a lot of students who are new to the district and begin to register. So we start to meet bi-weekly with the elementary principals to really track the numbers and watch the sections and watch the sizes of classes and determine if we need to add another section at any grade level. And so that's really pertinent to us. If we were to start school tomorrow, you could see that our enrollment, 2021-22, that is the actual numbers if we were to start school tomorrow. So the projected enrollment is in the middle. That's the NSDEC projections. And as you can see, we're very close to all of those projections as we move forward. And then the last column really gives you that snapshot of October 1st of last year and where we were. So if you were to look at the number of 8th graders in October 1st, it was 357, and as 9th graders, it's 351. Probably the number that we're watching really carefully in SACS is we ended in October 337 with 4th graders, and now we're up to 348 5th graders. So we've had an increase of 5th graders coming into the district. Chances are that's probably some 4th graders that arrived after January 1st, after that October 1st date, and then those are new people that are coming into the district as well. So we continue to track those numbers. SACs in the high school are a little bit easier when you're adding in those enrollments because you're spreading them off across teams. It's the elementary level that we really monitor closely. So happy to answer any questions.
Deanna?
So this isn't really fair, Jill.
Oh, sure.
I'm like, I feel badly
Well,
asking you a
I'll just call Darlene now.
That's right. She owes you one. So I was looking at the 2020-2021 enrollment in the elementary school, and it looks like our projected enrollment for next year is down 84 students at the elementary school, 1531 to the 1447.
Does it include preschool?
No, is that 1531 included though? Oh, you're right. So,
yes,
okay,
it's
so
the
it's down
46
44.
kids.
So it's down 44.
Yeah.
Right, or 40? Wait, now I gotta, sorry, thank you for, I didn't notice that that wasn't included in one number and it was in the other. So, 14, what is the 1487? So
But we're actually only
We're
4
down
off from our
44.
projections.
Excuse me?
And we're only 4 off from the NSDEC projections.
Yes, I am curious because we don't have that extra last year's NSDEC projections from last year. How, do you remember how close we were, or were we above the NSDEC projections this year? So 2021, the NSDEC projections for 2021, and where we ended up in October, because I don't have that
I
information.
think we were close to the projections. I think it was the year before. See the class of 321 in first grade in 2021? That was the surprise kindergarten class we had 2 years ago, where
Okay.
we were well above the projection by
Okay.
basis. But Dr. Granti knows.
No, you're absolutely correct. It was that kindergarten class that came in that are currently going to be moving into 2nd grade. And if you're looking at it, that is the class that we're continuing to monitor closely with South at 6 sections already.
Yeah, that's
so-
pretty impressive, given how close they were, given COVID and how many
Right.
people were in. So I guess then the next question is, how does this 1447 and sort of, we always say, let's talk to the realtors, because NSDEC isn't necessarily as accurate as the realtors. Have we had any opportunity to do that yet, or, it's not a huge, down 40 is not huge, but it's not nothing either. So I just didn't know. That's, 2 sections.
Well, if I'm sure you recall, when the large kindergarten class came in, the realtors were the only ones who predicted it. They knew it was coming. I have not had a chance to reach out to them, but we certainly, can and will. I think that we were wise to keep our staffing stable this year to next year in our budget, because as you can see on the horizontal page, it seems to be working out that way, where we might have to shift some folks around, but I don't think the numbers are shifting meaningfully.
Yeah, and I think that we're just going to have to watch the new complexes that are going in and tracking those numbers and working with the real estates as they know families are moving in as well, so that we can try to plan proactively.
It is encouraging to hear from parents with preschool age kids.
Just,
Sure.
I mean, just, Deanna, just to add to that, I mean, this data actually surprises me quite a bit, just given the pandemic real estate boom. I mean, we've all been watching the real estate headlines and numbers in New Canaan, and I know anecdotally on my street, I mean, I would say we've turned over 10 houses where there were no kids, and now they all have young kids. So this data actually, it shocks me.
Yeah.
So like, I hope that new families are
Enrolling right away.
yeah, and I mean, and I don't know if we need to do additional outreach. I mean, not only checking in with the real estate groups, but just, I don't know, additional outreach, just because as we emerge from the pandemic, there is a lot of noise. I'm just this, it's hard to believe, given what we all know is happening with the real estate in our town.
Well, and I think these numbers are early for us because we're taking into consideration withdrawals. And so the newly registered families are just starting to come that have moved into the district. And so this is our busy time. The month of July and August, it really picks up for us. So that's why we meet bi-weekly to really track all of these numbers really carefully. But we can certainly reach out to the real estate agents. Or
I have to
Darlene
schedule
can.
my fall conversation with them anyway.
Yeah,
7 years in running.
maybe a little earlier this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I was just interested that we were losing students over the, versus the projections at the New Canaan High School in every grade. And I was wondering if there was any anecdotal evidence behind what was happening there. Do you have any understanding of where the students are going? Are they moving? Are they going to private school? I'd just be curious.
So that's another piece of data that we collect when they do the withdrawal. I just haven't run the data,
Right.
but I can certainly ask the data team to do that. So the families do have an exit survey to let us know whether they're moving out of the community or whether they're going to private schools.
Okay.
But I would, most likely, I think it's moving out of community because I find ourselves doing a lot of transcripts and getting things off to other schools, but we certainly can get the data a little bit.
Interesting.
There was quite a bit of mobility this year
Yeah.
in the spring. Folks moving within the district or moving out of the district and asking to finish the year, more than we've had in my experience. The other thing at the high school, just to note, is, you know, the graduating class of 2021 was the largest class in history of the New Canaan Public Schools. So that 385 leaving does kind of a reshift. And I know you're comparing
Right.
against the projections, but if you look year to year, that's why that difference is there. But I also think the high school probably, to your point before, Jill, it's also probably a timing thing, where we just did the withdrawals, and now the enrollments are going to be coming over the course of the summer. And I would imagine that we'll see some rebalancing of that a little bit.
Okay.
You expect it to lower it, right?
Yeah, yes, people are moving in, but we typically have seen it throughout in the, really across the board. Yeah.
Right, and what these numbers don't take into consideration are pre-registrations. So these are the families that are fully registered. So oftentimes we have what we call a pre-registration, which means that we're still waiting for bills, or that they've actually purchased the home. It might be still a sale that's pending. So we have numbers that sit in pre-registration as well. These are actually, if we were to start school tomorrow, they're fully registered, all their documents are in, and they're ready to start school. I would have to look at my other sheet, but I could get that data for you too. But it varies from day to day, it changes, because as one family pre-registers, another completes it, so.
I just wanted to add what Sherry said with, with the influx of families that we keep hearing about, and it doesn't seem apparent on these documents, like even hearing from people in churches saying that there's like X number of new families. Is there a way that we can do a different type of outreach? Like, I know you've got a new Instagram handle, or I don't know, or a new Canaan.
Well, now that my interns are gone,
Yeah, I
I'm not
know.
sure how
I
active that's
know.
gonna be.
But, whether it's the advertiser, whether it's reaching out to New Canaan, I know there's so
Yeah, we
many
run
that-
an ad generally in the spring.
We do.
Right, but we can talk to folks about running
Yeah,
another
but
one.
there is
It's
so
unusual
many,
year.
like,
Yeah.
I'm surprised that there isn't like a huge uptick, so. I
And
don't
it
know.
could be just children that are under 5.
Yeah. I do think there's different ways to reach out. If we can think of different ways to
Yep.
get people to register earlier versus like in August.
Yep, we can maybe do something that we can send out to the community.
Yep. instead of the first selectman using our email system, well, maybe I'll ask to use his.
Yeah, good idea. Good. All right, thanks, Dr. Crunty. Well, as we close out one year, we start another.
Yes, we do.
Preliminary considerations for next year.
Okay.
Dr. Lutzy.
Pull that up. That's not it. Oh, no, that's correct. There we go. So this is a document that we are required under the ESSER 3 grant to publish. It's a federal requirement that we publish on our website, where they're calling a school reopening plan. We're calling it a continuity of services plan, because our schools were open 97% of the time. And I'm not going to create a school reopening plan for schools that are already open. So instead, it's about continuity of services. And really, again, this graph actually finishes the dates to get up to the most recent data that was shared. And you see it's virtually 0 for us here in New Canaan for number of cases per 100,000. And statewide, and we heard some data tonight that was right in line with what I heard from the DPH and other folks on the rules subcommittee call I had just before our meeting tonight, that statewide each day it's less than 1 case per 100,000 people, which is really such a strong testament to the success of everything that we've done and people's commitment to keeping themselves and each other safe, and means that we can really look at everything and make some decisions about those mitigation strategies and look to relax them, where appropriate and in the right ways. So this plan itself is meant to be a living document. This is not a put it out there, leave it there, and make it happen. This is meant to be something that is edited and evolves throughout the summer, as our plan did that's on the website right now. The plan that, the reopening plan for 2021 is a document that we were continually updating and editing and adding to. So this is based on what we know today and the feedback that we've gotten. And again, I got some great feedback just this evening from the DPH and the SDE on where we are as a state and what we're thinking around for next year. So very at a high level, the continuity of services plan is really about the mitigation strategies, where we are with those strategies, and where we anticipate we may be next year when we come back to school. And what we're doing is planning with the expectation that trends will either stabilize or continue to improve. And we know that if trends deteriorate and go in a worse direction, then we'll have to keep an eye on it and make some different decisions, perhaps about things. But as far as some of these strategies and the approach go, right now we anticipate that next year, again, if they trend stabilize or improve, that we would not be required, that universal mask wearing would not be required in our schools. Even just tonight, speaking with folks, they're saying the prevalence of the virus in Connecticut is so low that if these trends continue, we don't anticipate that need. And I think that that's good news for folks. Certainly, we know that how hard it is for children. It's hard for teachers to wear masks all day as well. We know that, as you said, whether it's language acquisition, just communication, expression, other things. This is if we don't have to do it, we don't want to do it. And right now we're in a place where we don't believe we're going to need to require masks in our buildings next year. We did hear, and I agree with this absolutely, that if people feel like it's appropriate for them to wear masks, then they should, and they can, and they always have that option to do that. And there's a term, COVID exceptionalism. Right? We don't want to treat COVID differently than we treat other illnesses and other things that we deal with and work through. And we're getting that place now. We've learned enough about the virus where we can make some strong decisions about all these things. So anyway, where we are today, if the trends are stable or continue to improve, I don't anticipate that we would need to mandate masks in our schools in the fall. And if things change, we'll all know it. It'll be talked about. It'll be in the press. It'll be in the papers. And we'll have to get together as a board and an administrative team and talk that through and make some decisions that way. Of course, we are expected to adhere to executive orders and mandates from the state. as required by law. So we always have to keep an eye on that. But I also, just for what it's worth, that's one of the advantages of being part of the rules subcommittee, that I am able to have these conversations with folks who are then having conversations with their commissioners and others, and it's a very collaborative discussion right now. So I do anticipate that, I know the DPH is continuing to look at this. I anticipate some updated guidance may be forthcoming, and look forward to seeing that. So that's the piece on masks. Physical distancing, we, throughout the year, we've strategically used all of the space possible in our rooms to maximize the distance. And we're going to continue to do that. That's just good practice right now. But we are going to start using our specialized classrooms again. So we'll be in the art rooms, we'll be in the music rooms, we'll be in the gyms for PE, we'll be in those specialized spaces that we didn't use this year because we needed them for other classes.
I was gonna say, if we're putting this behind us, why are we going through this extra measure of continuing the social distance? Why don't we just get back to normal?
Well, it'll be almost normal. What you won't have is bookcases in rooms that take up space for books that you may not be using that year. Things like that. Like, we're maximizing the space that's in there. Just to begin the school year, we wouldn't do something that would have a programmatic effect. So for instance, we're going back to shared materials in the art classrooms. This year we did bags for each student, and we weren't sharing materials. Now we're going to share them. We'll wash them, make sure kids are washing their hands, but we'll go back to those kinds of procedures as well.
So classrooms will be back to normal sort of use?
Yes. Yep. They just may not have the bookcases in the corners, things like that. Like, we'll just kind of spread about the kids as we can. Yep. And actually, the cohorting leads right into that. So this year, we were very strict with the cohorting, and actually, it was important to do because it did help us to limit the number of quarantines that were required based on positive cases, because we knew who those cohorts were. And so we did adjust the program with our teams at the middle school, for instance, where we didn't have kids going cross-team. And if they were in a cross-team class, it would be hybrid. Some would be in person, some would be a live stream, and then they might move the next day. And we're moving away from that, again, to go back to what it was pre-pandemic. We're doing it in a way where we do have an off-ramp, if need be, so that if things deteriorate and we have to go back to creating the stronger cohorts, we can do that at the middle school, which I think is an important part, just in case. Kids won't notice it in their program. They'll still be mixing a bit when they go to their world language classes or their specials, and we'll just have 2 teams mixing instead of 4. It's a heavier lift on the scheduling side, but it won't make a difference to the kids. So I think that's a good move. Grades 7 through 12, again, full program. They have the natural cohorting in the teams at 7th and 8th grade, and we'll do the same thing. Of course, the high school thing, we don't have teams, but we are going to continue with our block schedule program. Limits the number of classes kids take to 4. And so again, it reduces the number of kids that they would come into contact with along the way.
I have a question on that as well.
Sure.
We talked about block programming, around the budget time or full time, that we were going to do it through this year, and then we were going to discuss whether we do it again in the fall. So this looks like you're doing it. So we're going to have that discussion before the fall. How's that going to work?
Sure. Well, the high school committed to doing it quite a while ago, because they had to in order to create their schedule and get things going, with what they're doing. What I'd be more than happy to do is have, Bill Egan come and share with us all the work that he's been doing throughout the course of the year. They just ran focus groups with their teachers to get feedback, and they've been doing work with students as well to get feedback and develop a professional learning experience for the staff going through next year.
I mean, it's a bit of a process problem, right? We talking about this and then deciding to do it. It's something to go back and decide.
Sure. So I think there's 2 reasons. One, as a COVID strategy, I think it's important for us to continue it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I also think that that's the one piece, and the second piece is the feedback from the staff at this point has been encouraging and positive. And so they've been looking at developing that professional development program for them. So I think with those, those 2 things going into it, yeah.
The only thing I would add is, as part of the school start time discussion, in terms of being able to cut the high school by 5 minutes so that we could get to a better solution for school start times. We've discussed keeping the block schedule for, I have months now. So I remember the discussion we had before, and it just seemed to me that sort of events and the success of the block programming overtook it, which is not to say it wouldn't be wonderful to have Billy Egan come in and tell us, why he likes it. But we have been, I'm just saying in terms of putting it out there, we've
No,
been
I know,
talking
but
about that.
it would have been better if we had the discussion and we talked about it, and then we decide to do it, as opposed to it just goes, that's all. There's lots of points of view on that. Maybe they're not all, a lot of people like it, maybe some don't. But we didn't have that discussion, so I don't know.
Okay. Okay, so just continuing on, the hand washing, of course, we'll continue with our sanitation stations and everything that's there. Some of these are required by the grant, which is why they're in here, things like respiratory etiquette.
What is
That's
that?
coughing into your elbow. Yeah. Washing your hands after you do, those kinds of things. So it's always good practice. Our custodians were key players in helping us keep our schools open this year. So we're going to continue as we begin the school year with our cleanliness and maintenance program. The grant is actually helping to fund some additional custodians going into next year so that we can continue that degree of cleanliness there. The contact tracing, isolation, and quarantine had some positive, encouraging news today about that with the call that, we may be able to look at some changes next year if the level of virus remains at where we are or continues to go down. This year we were guided by Addendum 5, which is the responding to COVID-19 scenarios and then the contact tracing scenarios. That's really, again, it was DPH, SDE working together who created those protocols, and then we adapted them and put them in place. So we'll continue to follow their guidance around that as needed. But again, I'm optimistic that we're on the right path and we won't be seeing having the need to do that so much. As you know, our quarantine period went from 14 days to 10 days to 7 days, and testing remained an important part of that work. The diagnostic screening and testing I mentioned earlier, we're looking at continuing to do that in a strategic way to help families and students as needed. So we may look at a testing event prior, like 2 weeks maybe prior to the opening of school, just for folks who maybe have been traveling all summer, and then make some decisions based on that. There is money available in
Yeah,
the
I was gonna
grant.
say, are you thinking to go all year with that, or?
Hopefully we don't have to. Yeah, hopefully we don't have to. I think that there's money available specifically for testing in the grant, so I think we can set up a large-scale event, do it prior to the start of the school year as a way for people who've been traveling all summer before they return. And then if it plays out that the levels are very, very low, then we can be in good shape. We're going to continue with our vaccination efforts. We've got high levels of our certified staff and all staff that are here, and that continues to be successful for us to defeat the virus and to bring these levels down. Again, given the very positive trends, we don't anticipate that we need to permit or to provide full-time remote learning for students. We're, as you mentioned before, Katrina, we're looking at ways to continue to improve and accelerate our program, using the technology and the things that we've learned. And there's a committee of staff, K-12, that I'm working with as sort of an advisory committee to talk some of these things through and get their feedback around some things. There's some courses that may work very well in a blended environment, typically at a secondary level. That could really be a natural fit. So we're looking for ways to do all of that. But it's empowering to think we make those decisions based on what's best for the program and not driven by health and safety needs caused by the pandemic. In our weekly schedule, as you know, we had our half-day Wednesdays. Again, that really served an important purpose, because while most other school districts were closed for a day in the middle of the week or at the end of the week, we did half-days, so we brought our kids in. They were doing fully remote learning on that day, and we just felt that FaceTime was so much more important. So to do the half-day with our kids in school gave us at least that 5-day rhythm. In the same way, given where we are, we don't anticipate that we'd have to implement half-day Wednesdays next year. So, you know, we had them for we had the half days for cleaning, for professional learning, for, you know, for our kids and everything else. But now, you know, again, as long as things stay stable where they are, we don't anticipate needing to do that next year. So the planning right now is for going full, a return to the schedule as approved by the Board of Ed for 21-22.
So, you know, there was a collective sigh just now from students and parents who loved the half-days. And there has, I mean, we have received a few emails just advocating for the continuation of half-days, and there are some private schools who have ongoing half-days built into their schedule. Can you just kind of expand on why that's not an option for the
Sure.
public school?
You know, many of the private schools that do that also have half-days on Saturdays. You know, and for us, the part of what we look at are contact hours with our kids. We also know that all the ages of our kids from K-12, our younger family, our families with younger students can have it can be a struggle for them to find babysitting coverage for their kids on those days. For us, we did take advantage of the time for really powerful professional learning, and we may come back to ask for a couple of hours here and there, you know, over the summer to look to see if we have some months that don't have the professional learning. But I think as we look to adjust our start times in the future and we look to get to a rhythm, I think a return to the full days is the right move for us. Again, it's not just the number of days, it's also the number of hours in the course of a school year. And, you know, I've said this forever, that I'll always advocate to have the kids more. We want them back, we do miss them. But I understand as well, because it's, you know, hopefully also the stress levels come down a little as the pandemic continues to recede. Mhm. But I understand. I'm not just being mean. Similarly, in the cafeterias and for lunch, we anticipate using the cafeterias fully. We'd look to try to keep the cohorts together a bit where we can, where it makes sense, but we pre-pandemic going back to the cafeteria, which means we wouldn't be using the gyms. Right now, we're using the gym at Saks to reduce the number of kids in the cafeteria, and we were using gyms and other spaces in the elementaries as well. We're still going to encourage kids to go outside. You know, here at the high school, we're always encouraging them to go outside, and we have tables there, and, you know, getting them outdoors always makes sense whenever you can. But go back to using the cafeteria, which lets us go back to using those other spaces for those programs.
So I just want to clarify, just because of the way this is written, because it says, it talks about the high vaccination rates of 12 and over, and going back, you're meaning K through 5th grade will also, or K through 4th will also be fully using their.
I do.
Their,
Yep,
okay.
yep, this
We
kid's
might
right.
want to change that
Yep.
language a little, because it makes it sound like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's referring to those who are vaccinated.
Yep, we can do that. Yep, but that's across the board. Go back to using the cafeterias and using those spaces. Yep. And then into our recess and outdoor activities. Again, same thing. You know, again, we've learned so much about the virus and its transmission. So now we're very comfortable saying that we anticipate being able to use our equipment outside, use the balls, play the games, do the things that the kids would do. And when students are outside, there's no mask requirement regardless, right? So that's where we've been going for mask breaks, but for the playgrounds, the equipment, for PE, other things, we would use all the equipment and return to our program there. Transportation, for our bus transportation would resume at typical capacity. We're still going to ride with our windows open, right, and cleaning the high-touch areas on the bus frequently. Giving students the option to wear masks at this point for the duration of the bus ride. They are a little closer to folks, shoulder to shoulder, sitting in the seats, but that's going to be at their discretion. And there may be a statewide mandate on this, there may not, but if there's not, we would make it optional as we are everywhere else. But we do anticipate taking the buses back to full capacity and would encourage people to use the buses because those lines that drop off are very long. Yep. And then the last piece is around volunteers. As long as the positive health metrics continue, we want to welcome our volunteers back. We want to allow folks to come back in and work with our kids in our schools. We've talked about, there's a couple of different roles of volunteers. Some of the positions of volunteers are different people each day. in some buildings. Others are sort of a small group of people who do it over a longer period of time. So we're working with our principals to figure out the right protocols around that a little bit, what's going to make the most sense. You know, at this point, our language here is that we're asking volunteers to show proof of vaccination. An alternative to that could be that if people are not vaccinated, we ask them to wear a mask with their volunteering in the school. Again, it's adults versus kids as we're in the school space. So this is something that we're going to continue to develop. This is only meant to be an initial draft, but there should be no language in here that makes anyone, that leads anyone to believe that we're requiring vaccinations of our students or community at this point, right? We're not, we have no intention of requiring students to be vaccinated for COVID.
Deanna? Oh,
Yeah,
someone else.
okay, just, you know, and I don't know I know nothing about antibody levels, but maybe there is a way to look at, you know, talking with the DPH or health people, that if, you know, it's a legitimate comment that if you've had COVID,
Mm-hmm.
you are not probably going to spread COVID, and you're not gonna have it. So I think, and there is some evidence out there that some people shouldn't be vaccinated if they've had COVID. There have been cases. So I think it is our duty to look at if there are other options for those parents, if they have antibody levels, and obviously masking. But if a parent has had COVID, has been, you know, told by their doctor that they shouldn't be vaccinated because they've had it, then maybe there's an alternate, like show an antibody test that shows that they are eligible. I don't know, but I'm sensitive to not bringing it in. And, you know, obviously anybody can always wear a mask, but I would never want to say a parent can't come in to the schools if they're willing to wear a mask or show an antibody test. So I think we need to be a little bit more flexible around this language.
Jen?
All right, so I just have a couple of comments. So just back to the block scheduling, I know we have discussed it at length, and personally I love it, and my daughter loves it, but I do think that we should definitely have a meeting about that. I don't know when we can do that before, like, our next meeting. I don't know, it's like summer, but I do think that, because I mean, with COVID and everything, I know there's been so much going on, but that would be great to hear from Bill and get the feedback from the teachers and the surveys and all of that. Half-day Wednesdays, sigh, I'm sad too. Because I love that, and I know that kids in the high school love it, but I know that the younger kids, it's really tough, so I understand that. The volunteering, I totally agree, Deanna. I feel like there has to be, I don't know, hopefully we can ease up on the vaccinations, you know, the card and stuff. It just seems so strict, and I don't know. Because we do, I mean, part of it's so much fun going in and seeing your kids in school and stuff. So hopefully we can work on that a little bit, just to make it a little bit more conducive for everybody. And then just on the mask wearing policy, can you just talk a little bit about like the governor and where things are right now with that? And, you know, again, we're like abiding by state mandate at this point. So I was just wondering if you could just give us and everyone here just a little bit.
Sure,
Feedback.
be glad to. So yeah, right now, well, back in May, I believe, Governor Lamont signed Executive Order 12A, which spoke about masks and requirements around wearing masks, or, you know, loosening up requirements that were in place at the time. In that executive order, he also authorized the Department of Public Health and the commissioner to issue guidance for schools to follow, and other places to follow, prisons, other things like that. So the Commissioner Gifford subsequently put out the interim guidance for universal mask wearing in school, or face coverings in schools, which does require all people in schools to wear masks. And that, the Executive Order 12A expires on July 20th, at which point that interim guidance that was created by Commissioner Giffords would expire. We are interpreting that to be, the schools to be defined as when kids are in the building, when school is in session, which is how we're sitting here tonight, not wearing masks, because it's not serving as a school, because there's no kids. We're adults at a meeting place. Well, there might be a couple of kids, but not at school. So that's our interpretation of that and how we're using it. Now, the conversations that I've been a part of and the conversation I had tonight gave me some hope that that interim guidance may be shifting, but it's a long process for that to occur. But if it does, then it may, given again the low prevalence of COVID in the environment and in the state, that, they may be able to shift off that a little bit for summer school and for ESY, extended school year for special ed. But that, remains to be seen. There's more conversations that need to happen. So right now, the executive order and the subsequent guidance from the commissioner that's authorized by the executive order does mandate masks in school buildings, not outside and not at other events like that. Is that what you were looking for?
I am. I'm wondering how, like, we navigate that throughout the summer. Like, what if, are we gonna, are there people pushing back against this? I mean, I know there's parent groups, but are there schools, or like, do we have any idea if the governor's planning on keeping this in place for the fall?
Well, his executive order will stay in place until the 20th of June.
Right.
And then he's really
July.
looking to,
July.
I mean, July, I'm sorry.
July.
He's looking to the Commissioner of Department of Public Health to create the guidance based on the data, based on the
Right.
science. And so I have some reason to hope that that's going to shift before July 20th, but I also know that things take time. So we'll see kind of, how things go. But I have more reason to be optimistic about the fall, as long, again, as the rates continue, that perhaps after July 20th, there wouldn't be a need for a mask mandate going forward from there. So, the metrics are really strong, not just here, but across the state. Less than one case per 100,000 people statewide is a big deal. The hospitalizations have gone down. Currently, there are 7 people hospitalized in Yale, New Haven, none of whom have been vaccinated, and it's one of the lowest numbers that they've seen. So, all of the strategies work together to control this, and to move in the right direction, so.
Deanna?
Okay, so this isn't technically on the sheet.
Okay.
But I've asked the question before and I haven't gotten an answer yet. So this year, the state passed legislation removing the religious exemption for vaccinations. Is the COVID vaccine going to be included in those required vaccines, one? And I guess that's, and how are we gonna handle, because right now, vaccines are only for 12 and up. How are we gonna handle those K through 5 kids if we have a new vaccine that comes out and is eligible? Because they're talking about 2 and up now.
Sure.
So,
Okay, so on the first part,
yes.
I can't give a definitive answer, but I can share that in my conversations with the folks in the Rules Committee and others, I do not have indication that the COVID vaccine is going to be required as the others are. But I also, the conversation does shift to, it is an emergency authorization right now, and they are going for full authorization, and that might, if and when that happens, it might spur another conversation about whether or not it's required. But as of right now, I don't have any indication that it would be. Okay. And as you're right, that's a state level decision. And around that change in the legislation, the state did publish an FAQ that went through and shared, answers to those commonly asked questions about, what does the removal of the religious exemption mean? How does it work, and all of those things. So if people are curious about that, it's all on the website there. On the second piece, I think that certainly, as we have so far, if and when the authorization were to expand, we would facilitate access for students and families who are interested in getting that. We, with our partnership with the health department, who now, as they've continued with the vaccinations, they've learned the shelf life of the vaccines, and they've figured out that, Moderna, you can hold Moderna for 6 months, you can hold the Pfizer for X number, I think 90 days, whatever it is, where in the beginning, we had to use it within a week, and, it was different, because that's one of the things they fast-tracked, was sort of testing the storage of the vaccines and the duration of the storage, and you can't do that without waiting all those months, and they didn't want to wait, so that's why they kicked it right in, and then said that it was, they restricted the use to make sure that it was, within what had been tested, how the rigorous studies go. So anyway, given that these storage requirements have shifted a bit on the vaccines, our health department's able to have them in stock and ready for anyone who wants to get them. And if they do expand the eligibility to be younger grades, we'll look to facilitate that both locally here with the health department, and we probably also look with Connecticut community health centers, which ran clinics over at Danbury Mall. I believe they did the ones over at Lord and Taylor, and really have it down to science as far as moving a lot of people through quickly. But with all of that, as I said before, I don't anticipate requiring, as a district, requiring students to be vaccinated at any level. You know, we just don't see that as something that we would pursue for a variety of reasons. Closest to a full answer that you've gotten so far? All right, I'm trying.
I have just one question. As we approach, the new school year, do you anticipate that we'll have full return to orientation and school building visits and tours and all the things that, as kids, especially the ones that are making changes to a new school?
Yep.
would
You
normally
know what,
have?
I do. They'll look a little different in that maybe the number of kids that are doing them would be smaller. So like Steve Clapp and I were talking today. He's our 5th grade assistant principal, and he's going to be setting up tours for incoming 5th graders, but he's going to do it at a smaller scale and just more frequently, right? So bring them through and let them see. And then we'll be doing the same. We did our kindergarten orientations. Instead of 2 groups, we did 4 groups, and just had them in smaller groups, but everyone's able to go through an experience. And actually, I think they really liked it. I know over at the elementary principals thought it was very successful, what they were doing. So yes, I anticipate being able to do that. The open houses may be a little challenging, so we're still trying to work through exactly what that might look like, because here at the high school with our 1,300 kids, we get at least that many parents coming through, and the teachers and all together in one place. It's a little trickier, so we've got to work through the details around that, but we've got some time.
Yeah.
But as far as the visits for students that are new to schools, absolutely. So, like, for instance, one thought is maybe you'd have all the 9th grade parents come in, because they're new to the high school and haven't been here before, and then just maybe there's remote or something else for the other students' parents who've been here, or maybe it's 9th and 10th since nobody came this year too. So we're working those things out, and we'll have some proposals, some plans to share with you as the summer goes on.
Great.
Just one last thing on the volunteer option here. Why wouldn't we just let people in, and then if there's a cause to adjust, like the viruses, why don't we just say people can come, and then if there's an issue to address, then we deal with it then, and just remove this vaccination proof. If either the vaccines are working and the spread is really low anyway, or they're not, and if they're not, then we have a whole different problem, right? But just if things get bad, at least start with people can just be normal again.
I think that I would clap too. I think it's a really good thing. But I think we want to get closer to the start of the school year, to be honest. I think that, we're talking a lot about what we're doing with our kids and where we are, and we feel very comfortable doing that because we know we have a good sense of where they are. There's always the concern about bringing something into the school, from somebody who's not there. So I think that it's definitely on the table, and I think as we approach the school year and get a little closer and get a little more data, make sure the trends are holding. Let's have that conversation.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Great,
Very
thank
informative. Good progress. And then our last report is on the school start and end time update. When you're ready. Take your time.
It's okay. I'm all excited having people in person. It's fun. I am ready. Okay, so I'll be brief, and then certainly Dr. Keating or anyone else is invited to fill in the blanks, because I'm certain to miss something. But I wanted to share with the board tonight that, as we've said before, we've continued to work the problem around the timing in the school start times. And we really prioritize the first tier to really work through that and get that as late as we can. And so I guess I'll begin with the good news and then kind of break things down a little bit from there. But as we said, when the board committed to that scenario, we would really focus in, and you trusted us to do that, and we're incredibly grateful for that. So after multiple meetings with Roy and talking with, Joanne and I talked with Roy and working things through and coming up with some planning, I can confidently say now to the board that we can get to 8 o'clock with our first tier.
Wow.
If we get to, I know, it's 8:35 for our second and 9:20 for our third, but we'll keep working on the other two. But we can get to 8 o'clock with our first tier of the elementary kids. Because we heard the board, we heard you say how important that was. Yeah, you can clap. All right. It's an incredibly big deal. And so it's going to take some more resources, which we'll talk about in a moment. But what we're doing, as we said, was we're going to continue to dive into it, to look at it, to refine the runs, look at, there's the physics of it, and there's also human behavior, and we're going to continue working through. We can't promise anything we can't deliver, but we can promise to keep working on it. That's what we've done, and that's what where we are right now. We're going to keep working on that 9:20. We want that to get earlier and try to move that over. We'll try to get high school over to 8:30, although that's a really tall order to make it only half an hour, given all the constraints that we're under. But between space and time and human behavior and resources and strategically looking at all of this, this summer we'll be riding the routes, right? Dr. Keating and I will take our show on the road a little bit. We'll ride some of these longer routes and get a sense of it and work through and continue to refine it. This is what it takes. It takes real focus to do this, and that's what you asked us to do, and that's what we committed to doing. So, and we have from the beginning. So now, moving forward, we are looking at a plan to pick up two Type 2 buses. Okay, so part of how we can get to 8 o'clock is to look at, we have some runs in the corner, some spots, where our buses pick up a couple of kids and then have to spend 8 minutes or so turning around in another town, coming back down, picking up more kids. And so there's a couple of runs that are problematic because of the duration of those runs. So what we're looking to do, the big buses are Type 1, the smaller buses are Type 2. Type 2 fits about 16 to 20. Picking up, if we purchase 2 of those Type 2 buses, we have some drivers on staff already with their CDLs, their Connecticut driver's license, where they can drive those buses. It would give us, so essentially we would be in-housing those 2 buses and the drivers, not through DATCO, but through our own program. They'd be yellow buses that we'd be using, but they would shave off the couple longest runs and help us to move our time tighter and get to that 8 o'clock. We would purchase, it'd be a one-time purchase of the 2 Type 2s. And then it'd be our employees who are driving them, of course, in partnership with DATCO and whatever, but they'd be our folks. And we would get a service contract with DATCO to make sure the buses are maintained the way they need to be. The Type 2s also have the advantage of being available. So during the school day, with a couple of Type 2s, we can move our alternative program, or some of the kids in the alternative program, to different experiential educational opportunities. We can use them, if it works out in the timing, to move our smaller teams, like our golf team, our tennis team, some other things for different reasons that way. We can find ways to kind of capture that resource and use it throughout the program to help things. And certainly pre-pandemic, getting buses for all those activities after school was a real challenge. So this will help with some of that, we believe, although we have to see exactly what timing we use those 2 Type 2s. Purchasing them would be a one-time, like I said, then we just pay for the driver. And that seems to be much more efficient than doing it through DATCO, where we're paying annually, for the bus, because it also gives us all the other flexibility. And the driver, for instance, may not drive the first run. Maybe they're not on the first tier at all. So then they can start earlier on the second tier, and that's how we collapse that time. So we've got those kids that are way out there on a bus that we own that we're using just for the second tier and the third, but not for the first. That's kind of the creative thinking that we've been engaged with and sort of sketching out, knowing that 8 o'clock was the target. Okay, so you'll see in the action items, we're looking for a transfer to move the resources over to purchase those 2 Type 2s, which will enable us to do that work. And that would be, the transfer itself is for $126,000, which is in the salary account, which could be transferred over to purchase those 2 Type 2 buses. And Dr. Keating can go through, there's some specifics around that. But I think that as far as the school start time update goes, the focus is now, like I said, on that 9:20 and trying to work to bring that as early as possible, as close to 9 o'clock as possible, and then continue to refine the routes and run things.
Penny and then Deanna, go ahead.
So do you have any update on what the first bus pickup times would be for the first year? Or is that, you're still working on that?
I would
You know,
say
'cause
we need
right
to keep
before
working
we
on
were
it, but
at
it's,
7:10, but it sounds like it might be a little bit after that.
it might be a little bit after that, but I want to be concerned, I want to be careful in how we lay it out. But yes, it would be a little bit later than that. We'd have to get the actual routes down to know. Yeah.
Okay. And do you think you're gonna have early dismissals for many school sports, or that's with the extra 5 minutes in the school day will still be good?
You know, I don't know that 5 minutes is going to make a heck of a difference.
Okay.
Going from 8:35 would put us at 3:05, and we're going to
Mhm.
keep trying to work that down to 8:30. So we'll keep trying to do that work and see how close to 8:30 we can get. Again, part of this is human behavior versus the physics piece. So for instance, we are looking to load the buses and get them rolling quickly out of the elementaries, which will then help get them back here for the high school for that dismissal and get things rolling. So we're gonna see, if we can, right now it's 8 minutes to get to the bus and to load that up here at the high school, and maybe there's a way to work those numbers down a bit. So those are the things we're gonna be looking at. And we'll share more details as we develop more of the routes. We're really rebuilding the routes from the ground up.
So somewhat related to school start time and the block schedule, if it works when we get the update on that, I would love to know if there's going to be any flexibility in terms of scheduling for teachers who have a particularly long commute, to be able to have their classes earlier in the day so they're not getting involved in that traffic on the Merritt Parkway. Because I know that can get, it's good, we're all going back to normal. I've been stuck in some Merritt Parkway traffic jams
Not all normal is
recently.
good.
Yeah, some of that is like
perfectly
frustrating. It's good to be frustrated again.
Yeah, so the block schedule itself is gonna be a rotating block, which helps in a couple of ways. So it makes
Oh,
sure that
okay.
every student if they have one free block, every student gets a sleep in, every student gets an early dismissal, and, so it'll be 4 a day and they'll be rotating. So it works the same with staff. If they need to, if something goes on in a certain morning or whatever in the afternoon, perhaps there's some flexibility. But the rotating block really helps if there are some early dismissals required, which we hope there wouldn't be, but if there are for, activities, events, or other things, it wouldn't always hit the same class.
Oh, I see, okay.
Deanna?
So I'm thrilled that we're getting to 8 o'clock. Just a question on the buses, only because I've sat through so many budget cycles that I'm a little, are we allowed, do we have to bring this to the Board of Finance if we're purchasing buses?
The board has the right to purchase whatever they choose to in their allocation, their bottom line allocation. So we'll be transferring $126,000 from the salary account to the equipment account, and we'll be purchasing, the 2 Type 2 vehicles. We purchase equipment on and off. Throughout the years that that is in the tens of thousands of dollars. This is more expensive than the typical expenditure, granted, but I will confirm with Joe Santafanti, our CPA.
That would be great, because being a finance person, historically, a bus would be a capital item to me.
Sure.
And so I would want to be on very strong footing, that's okay. But
Yeah.
obviously, I'm thrilled with the idea of getting more buses. I just don't want us to,
Well, and we're looking to put up an encumbrance, I believe, at this point, correct?
We will. We'll encumber it. I will tell you that we currently purchase capital items, and they go on the town's fixed asset listing every single year, so I don't see an issue. But if there is, I'll let you know. And so there's 2 buses, the Type 2s, but there's also the likelihood that we're going to need either 1 or 2 Type 1 vehicles. And we're currently routing, instead of 41 buses with the new start times, to 42 with the 2 Type 2s. So if we can hold it at that 1 additional bus, because that's 110 a year, we're doing our best to do that. If we can't, we're going to have to push it out to an additional 2. So.
Bob?
Question on the buses, like, I guess, why wouldn't you just go to DACO or explain that part of it? Right, because
Sure.
do they?
DATCO could provide for
Yeah,
us that
so-
Type 2.
And do we own other buses, or?
No, we own the vans, right, the
Yeah.
white vans, but not the buses. Dr. Keating, you can share
So
your
we
experience
pay
with
for the Type 2 vehicles, I believe the current rate is $102,000 a year. We have the resources, the drivers on staff right now that have the CDL. If we didn't, we would probably not do it because finding drivers is extremely hard. But because we do have these two drivers who did drive type 2 vehicles in an area town, we asked for pricing on the vehicles, and it's $63,000. We'll get 10 years out of the vehicle, and DACO will service them for us. So it's a financially prudent step to take right now.
Yeah.
We wouldn't take on the entire fleet because we're not bus contractors.
Right.
But the two that we are taking on, we feel that we can manage it.
It also gives us that flexibility during the day, because
Yeah.
there are staffs that'll be here and the buses will be here, so if we want to use it for alternative or launch or something else, we can use the resource throughout the day instead of in the morning, just for those runs.
Okay.
Jen?
Thank you so much. So excited. And just quickly, are we following up on the opting out for New Canaan High School? Like, what's going on with that?
We are, yep, so we did talk about that. We'll send something out to everyone 9 through 12 and find out. And we'll see, that'll help us with routing, and maybe we do it again mid-year and see if it makes a difference and if it can shave a little bit of time. So we'll give it a try.
All right. Excellent news.
Save the best for last, huh?
Yeah, that's the way to go. Okay, thank you for that update. All right, you all received a draft letter, statement proposed to be from the New Canaan Board of Education to the faculty and staff of our New Canaan Public Schools in recognition of their efforts throughout the pandemic. I have a motion for approving that letter. Penny, second. Jen, any discussion, comments?
I would just like to suggest that we also submit it to the newspapers as an additional way to amplify the message of gratitude to our teachers and staff, because I think it's very well written and very well deserved, so.
Okay, thank you, yeah. I think we were hoping to send it through the listserv and then also submit it to the papers, if you're okay with that.
I would also ask the board if you're comfortable if we put it into our COVID update.
Absolutely. Sure. Okay. Perfect. All in favor? All right, thanks everyone for that. And then our last is a motion to approve the transfers as discussed in the school start and end time.
The 126. You don't have that statement of accounts, it was just,
That's just the number.
yeah, it's 100.
Transfer of 126,000.
The motion we would request to be approved is to move to transfer $126,000 to the equipment object for the purchase of 2 Type 2 buses from the salary account, $100,000 from the teacher's account, and $26,000 from stipend, all through the salary account. I can give Lisa the motion.
Okay, that'd be great, thank you. Okay. Motion, Sherry, second. Jen, all in favor? Okay, approved, unanimous.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kading.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we'll take any additional comments from the public. Again, if you wish to speak, please approach the podium and just state your name. Thank you.
Hi, Joe Miller again with, I apologize for this if these were already answered, but some questions I have here. With regard to, I get confused, the executive order.
So I don't want to interrupt you, but just as a matter of practice, the board doesn't respond to questions in public. We certainly, if you have questions, I would encourage you to email them to us.
Oh, okay.
We can do our best to respond.
Oh, okay.
You're welcome to provide comments or ask the questions. I'm just letting you know in advance.
Okay. All right, well, I'm sorry, I thought I just had questions. I guess I'll email.
You're
them
free
you.
to ask them. I just,
Oh, okay, yeah, then I will.
Yeah, we just can't
So,
respond.
okay, so then with regards to the, with the executive order currently in place, can EOs be rescinded before the technical expiration time? Just for my edification, I don't know.
Yeah, so
Sometimes we respond. That's like an easy yes. Sometimes we respond.
Oh, okay.
We do, every now
Oh,
and then.
sorry, I'm lost here. Just, there's so much
I'm setting bad
information.
precedent.
Okay, so that would be one. And then if so, I guess the other thing I would ask is, I know there are some local school districts, Newtown, Old Lyme, that are petitioning for no masks for the following, for the coming school year. And then I guess I'll just state, and I have no problem saying this with regards to my kids, it's a comment. It's not for religious exemption or anything like that, but I have no intention of, I'm vaccinated, my wife's vaccinated, but I have zero intention of getting my kids vaccinated. And if that becomes a mandate, rather than guidance, hopefully it's a guidance, and, you know, guidance can be circumvented, but, you know, unfortunately, we moved here for the school district 8 years ago before we even have kids. So 3 years before we ever had kids, we knew this is where we wanted to be. So I'd hate to have to look into anything alternative if for some reason that becomes the case. And I'll get the other stuff to you because there's a lot of questions.
Okay, great, thank you.
My name is Amanda Morgan. Thanks for bearing with me earlier. I haven't publicly spoke about all that stuff with my daughter, and I was not expecting to get so emotional. So thank you. I have 2 comments. The first being, I really appreciate all the data that you guys put forth with cases and everything for the schools, but something that may be helpful and something I was asking myself as I was looking at that, what number or what percentage of those positive cases were asymptomatic versus a child who showed symptoms? Because what we've learned over the last year is that asymptomatic cases are not having as much of an impact as we initially thought that they were. So looking at that number, you know, I would want to know, okay, how many out of these couple hundred kids were actually sick, or were they just, did they get tested and nothing really happened because they came home from vacation? So that just might be something to consider that maybe you chart, because I think it would be helpful, especially because it's not as significant as it was last year. Miss West and Miss Richardson? Yeah. To answer your question about why enrollment numbers might not be as high this year, from what I've read, people are leaving the state faster than they're coming in, which may seem crazy because similar to you, on my street, the houses are turning over like crazy. But given what's going on politically, what's going on with masks, what's going on with propaganda and vaccine pushing, families are leaving. And families like mine who are using a religious exemption would be forced to leave next year, because this year we're allowed to use them, next year we're not. So that goes for a couple other of us in this room also. So I'm just giving you some insight into why numbers might be lower than you're anticipating based on what I've read in other articles. I think there was actually something in the patch that stated this as well. So I just wanted to share those 2 tidbits with you. And yeah, thank you so much.
Alessia Miller, I just wanted to echo Amanda's point to say that one of the things that may happen is that you may not see people move out of New Canaan, but what you might see is people form pods where they will homeschool due to the regulations, be it masks or vaccines. So again, considering enrollment numbers, you will have people still within the district, but not attending the schools due to these potential issues that come up.
Hi, this is Moroz again. I want to say I was actually pleasantly surprised that many of you not only repeated some of our arguments against masks and that COVID is under control, but actually gave your own new ones. Dr. Leslie pointed out that the COVID cases that we saw actually may not have happened at school. They may have happened at some party or in the locker room. So it seems that many of you actually are with us and do agree with the data and have your own data. We have been writing to Governor Lamont, emailing him, calling him. He has 2 interns, Cameron and Tom. Tom's nicer than Cameron. So this is quite important to us. We've been putting a lot of effort into this. A statement from you is probably worth 20 or 50 or 100 of ours. So those of you that do have these views and do have the data being closer to the school, I'd like you to consider writing a letter to Governor Lamont to also push him in this direction, since many of you do seem to be with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shannon Rowe. Just to touch base, thank you again, like Alessia said, for voicing our concerns. You guys do seem like you're on the same page as us. Just to touch base for what I talked about before, I'm just nervous, like the volunteers, that the parents have to be vaccinated in order to enter the schools. I'm glad we're gonna revisit that and hopefully that'll be changed. But is that gonna be the same concern for the children of the school, for the high school, the middle school? Are you gonna make those kids have to wear masks that are not vaccinated and vice versa? You know, that would be a terrible segregation to start. So I hope that that doesn't happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dan Bennett. A couple things I want to echo, I think, a few of the comments here, but I appreciate that it's a draft report on COVID and we only saw a few slides. But what I would encourage you is there's a lot of people in the community that are looking for data and frankly to understand some of the thought process that go into the various policies, understand some of the supporting documentation and things like that so that people can do their own research. And I think the more that you can put in there for people to review, the easier it is to get people behind a lot of this data. One thing I would say, and I think I probably know the answer to some of this and not all of it, but I think the asymptomatic versus symptomatic amongst the 305 students or 371 positive cases would be helpful to see. The number of hospitalized, I think it's probably very low for students, but will be a good data point to maybe take some of the fear out of the other numbers. And certainly the number of deaths, I think it's 0, which is a good thing. But I think highlighting some of that in addition to cases would be helpful. Another thing that I think would be helpful is the testing. So how many of these tests are PCR tests versus the rapid tests? I don't know if you track that data or not, but it would be good to see, as well as the cycle threshold for the PCR tests, because the higher the threshold, the higher probability that you may get a false positive. So just to understand some of that. One other thing I would say is the data behind natural immunity for people that had COVID versus vaccines. And there's a big push for vaccines and how long they may provide some immunity. And there's not as much support for natural immunity, but I don't think that's actually supported by the data. So to the extent that you're getting information from the Department of Public Health, I think it would be very useful to have that in the report. And lastly, related to Governor Lamont's executive order, I guess, is there a town attorney or anyone that has kind of advised you as to the legal enforceability of those executive orders? And
You have 2 minutes.
Sorry?
Sorry, you're
Oh,
at 2
okay.
minutes, sorry.
Because I think it would be helpful for people to understand, you know, what the town can or can't do, what is a recommendation versus a law, you know, what's a requirement and not. And lastly, related to the vaccines, you know, the UK and Germany have stopped the vaccines for 18 and under. And I would just ask that people have as much information related to vaccine studies for the 12 to 18-year-olds, certainly before they push it to another group. And again, it's not being against it, it's just providing data and support for people to really make informed decisions.
Okay, thank you all. Announcements and future business, Dr. Lutzy.
Sure. Our next scheduled board meeting is Monday, July 12th. Announcements, I guess I would just, whoops, I should turn that on. So our next meeting is Monday, July 12th, and I know the thing about putting numbers out is that you can read them in all different ways. I think that with our COVID report, I think that the biggest takeaway of all should be that with all of this going on, we persevered and we overcame, and we were in school 97% of the time. So the numbers are really meant to show that we can do anything. And so as we plan for next year, and we'll work again on the report, and I would ask for any feedback or whatever before we put this out, but it should really be, it's meant to be a celebration of our success and a statement of kind of, we're ready for what's ahead, and we'll make whatever decisions we have to make. But I think we should see it as inspiring that with this going on, we were able to maintain as much normalcy as we did for our kids throughout the year. So congratulations, and that's really the tenor of the report. And you'll see that when you read through the letters for the principals and others. And, you know, I think it's a really wonderful thing. So that's it.
Great. Thank you. And I think, you know, overall it was a very just positive meeting with the news on, the COVID year-end data, school start times, and everything else we discussed. So thank you. And, all right, motion to adjourn. Sherry, second. Penny, all in favor? All right, good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.